is to kind of dive into some of that. If you know here's where we are locally, here's where we are nationally, here's best practices, right? And then how do we help folks within our community? What are providers doing? If you know of someone experiencing homelessness or see someone really struggling, what's the next step as a community member? Yeah, we absolutely want to kind of tease out that a little bit so people know how to help folks.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
I would offer connection to Via Health. We offer mental health 101, first aid. And to Jamie's point, there are steps and there are official trainings that we can support the collaborative with.
Absolutely. Thank you, Celeste. I'll follow up with you about that.
Elvia, pull your mic down.
I apologize. So incidentally, coming up July 8th, about a month from now, we're going to be having a Narcan training. And so I'm inviting, we have space for about 25, and I'm inviting you all to be there. So in a series of what we're doing, so we can talk about that a little bit later, but I want to remind to do some work around community training for just to acclimate so that we can be better trained to serve how we are entering this work, to be more understanding with our citizens.
Yeah, absolutely, Elvia. Thank you for sharing that opportunity.
Yeah, so, yeah, continue.
Other questions, comments? I have, Jamie, you mentioned Safe Haven again, and it reminded me of a couple of aspects of the Safe Haven at the time. They were no requirement of sobriety to come in, and they were non-congregate. So each person had an individual room. So I think just in terms of our outreach around as the shelter work group, those are kind of the essential components that were part of Safe Haven that we need to make sure that we have going forward.
Thank you, David.
All right, last update from our team, and thanks so much to Charles and Debbie for their work on all of that. Last update from our team is the Emergency Solutions Grant. We talked about this last month, and the funding allocations work group is actively working through this now. As you know, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, through their ESG office, they administer ESG funding, which is federal funding that comes to the state and then comes to COCs locally from there. They released their request for applications for funding next calendar year on Tuesday. So we knew that was imminent, but didn't know exactly when it would happen. It happened on Tuesday, so I didn't have that by the time we published these meeting materials. But our COC is eligible for about $128,000. Up to 60% of that can fund emergency response activities, which means street outreach and emergency shelter. At least 40% must fund housing stability activities, which means targeted homelessness prevention, rapid rehousing, or HMIS. The funding allocations work group has met one time and will be reviewing applications and bringing funding recommendations back to this body in August for your approval prior to submission on behalf of the COC to the state for consideration. I'm sharing all of this with you, which again, we have talked through before, but sharing this with you to say that it's happening now, it is time, and also to share that information with the community that this funding application is going to be available. The funding allocations work group is meeting this afternoon to finalize some details, and then we'll publish this funding opportunity to the community tomorrow. That'll be on the city's website, and we'll also share it out through the distribution list that we use for HIAC. For anyone who's listening and isn't already on that distribution list, you can sign up on the Homeless Strategy Division page on the city's website. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Elvia.
I just wanted to make this statement. I made this at the last meeting that we had for this board. Out of this 100,000, 27,904 is funds to cover monies for gas and electric. And Duke does not contribute any of those funds. And so it may behoove anybody who is interested in having them contribute to have some conversation about this. We really need to concentrate this money on all of the other things that we don't think about that should be, this money should be focused more on, housing, not what people need, We shouldn't be concerned with gas and electric when we talk about these funds. It's not a lot of money. So it's just something to think about.
That's a good point, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Okay, next item on the agenda, we are more or less on time. This is Tim McEllier with the Code Purple report from this last season.
All right, thanks, David. And I'm going to try to keep us on time this morning. So, well, first off, I want to start off by saying this, certainly this Code Purple season wasn't just an effort on the part of ABCCM whatsoever. I wanted to thank all of our community partners for all their efforts this year, especially the folks that serve on Homeless Coalition. Their help was invaluable to us this year. And a big thanks to Asheville Transit, who really stepped up again this season and assisted with transportation and getting folks out to the appropriate locations and that sort of thing for them to be served and safe for the evening. So again, a big thanks to them. Just to put some numbers out there, summarizing the season, we had a total, and of course Code Purple starts in October, 1st of October ends, this year ended about mid-April. So for that time period, we had a total of 68 Code Purple incidences that was called. At the Veterans Restoration Quarters where we served men during this, we had 2,947 stays for the season. At Transformation Village, that served women and children that were coming in for Code Purple. We had 572 total stays, so total we had 3,519 stays for the season. Peak months that we were really looking at historically is December and January. This year was not an exception to that. We had 15 Code Purple instances in December and 16 in January. We had 976 total stays in December, 969 in January. While we committed to, and I'm going to talk about on the men's side here, we committed to 50 beds, but we frequently found ourselves in a position to flex up from that, and fortunately we did have the capacity that we were able to do that by opening up some other space and that sort of thing. The biggest impacts weather-wise that we saw, or the biggest participation, was the week of Christmas. I know that's hard to think about how miserable that was when we're sitting here in June talking about this, but it was indeed miserable with sub-freezing temperatures, snow, a lot of ice, and certainly that provided a myriad of issues, but we were able to work through and overcome. But the peak times were the 23rd through the 26th, and our peak number at the men's facility was 89 that we served. So we flexed up pretty considerably to be able to handle and capture that volume. We have had one after-action review so far with some of the community providers and participants and that sort of thing. We're going to have some more going forward to prep for the upcoming season. we've already had some really good in looking at our processes and that sort of thing, some really good suggestions to come up, mostly focused around communication because that's so critical during that time frame to make sure we're getting the word out to everybody about, we have an incident coming up, you need to be prepared and that sort of thing. So I'm certainly looking forward to, us participating in that along with our community partners to continue to develop the Code Purple processes and that sort of thing. Going forward, as I said previously, we're going to be looking at all that kind of stuff, how we can improve communication, how we can serve more people, and all that. So that's kind of where we are. Yes.
This is an observation as well as a question. What's the temperature degree that drives Code Purple?
So the set temperature that we had, of course, is 32, but we look at a lot of factors in going into that. Wind chills, of course, if there's going to be precipitation and that sort of thing. So there was a couple times that we would call it when it was 35, 36, that sort of thing. But we had severe wind chills, or we were going to have a lot of precipitation, snow, heavy rains, that sort of thing. So we have made some adjustments there, but we kind of have to have a set temperature, a set cutoff, that we is kind of the foundation from what we work from.
This comment was from a gentleman who was in a micro shelter, and we were talking with them as we toured the different shelters for the shelter work group. And he said, when you're on the street, you can't tell the difference between 32 degrees and 34 degrees. And I just thought that was a very astute thing to think about.
Right. Right. I also wanted to mention too, as part of this, the outreach that we did as well. We did have our vans out all season, every night that it was Code Purple. We were, looking for folks that we could pick up. We had some pickup points and designated times at the Crisis Ministry downtown, as well as Salvation Army and the Rescue Mission. But for folks that didn't want to come in, we distributed blankets and coats and hats and hand warmers and food, and also a list of resources and how to get in touch with us and what they needed to do if they wanted to come in, going forward and that sort of thing. So we were out active in the community, doing that as well. And I know we had some other agencies that were out, distributing supplies and stuff like that. So many thanks to them as well.
Tim, are we doing any work still around the hurricane season? I mean, Code Purple used to, as far as, at least since I've been in Asheville, still means hurricanes and other types of inclement weather. I just wanted to point that out to people, that we don't just, use Code Purple as a term for cold weather. It's inclement weather.
Right, and I think we still look at it from, I know that our agency looks at it from more of a disaster contingency
Yes.
standpoint than anything else. So, and we have been out in the past when we've had flooding here. I know that I've been down at the river pulling people off the riverbank saying, let's go,
Exactly.
we're getting ready the river's getting ready to crest. So, but yes, we still do that. We coordinate with other agencies, Salvation Army and the Rescue Mission and that sort of thing to, if we're having severe weather incidences like that, to, open up and see what our capacity is and try to expand and take some more folks in.
And so at one point, a few years back, I had mentioned that maybe we should utilize a service much like calling into, how how people used to call in for the time. And so we developed this emergency phone system for Code Purple.
Yeah.
And then it disbanded here. And a lot of people liked that idea. And I'm not sure why it went away, but we did have that system set up.
Well, I may be speaking out of turn here, but I do think that that's coming back because the after-action review that we already had, that was one of the suggestions that made its way to the forefront that we all were like, oh, that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Why don't we think of that soon? So I feel pretty confident that going into the next season that we'll have, some type of number or something like that in place where you can call and get a recorded message that says that. But we have done a lot year over year to, improve communication. If you go downtown, at night when we're having a Code Purple incident, it's being displayed on the big panels at the at Harrah's, the Civic Center down there. So, we've done that. We're getting word out at like Asheville Transit, and that sort of thing. Of course, all the community providers, when they come in. A-Hope has done a great job letting folks know when they come in during the day that, hey, it's going to be Code Purple tonight. So you need to make arrangements and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good ideas out there. We just have to, kind of work through them and see what's doable and what's not.
Thank you.
Kim?
I had some curiosity about if, in addition to inclement weather, a lot of times we think about cold and hot weather, extreme temperatures. But watching what's happening, not just in New York, but here in Asheville and Buncombe, we have an orange air quality forecast for today. It says here for the Asheville Buncombe Air Quality Agency, this means the air quality is unhealthy for sensitive groups. Children, active adults, and those with heart or respiratory disease, including asthma, should limit outdoor activity. So that did make me wonder if we might consider inclement weather, including air quality. I know that decision makers in New York City are looking at whether or not that means expanding hours or getting people to come inside or sending alerts or having a call-in feature where folks can access clean, breathable air.
Right.
Yeah, that effect has been, the fires in Canada are creating this, so it's been going on for a while.
Any other questions? Suggestions? Thank you, everybody.
I don't have a question, but do you want to say a particular thank you to Tim for all of his leadership and work on this year? I mean, I think from my perspective, Code Purple was a tremendous success this winter season, and part of that is having such flexible capacity, and Tim was really adaptable and open, collaborative, really willing to listen to community partners and to be open to changing things in a way that would work better and better and better all the time. And I think we have a clear commitment from the planning group that put together the Code Purple plan and then did that after action meeting, a clear commitment for continuous improvement as we go forward, which is the kind of thing I think we want to see across our continuum of care in all of the work that we do. So just real appreciation for Tim and for ABCCM for the heavy lift that they took on this winter season.
Well, thank you. But again, it's team effort. We certainly couldn't have done it, without all of our community partners, but glad we were able to have the flexibility to be able to do it. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, foster youth independence vouchers. I might ask Sarah to come up and chime in if I leave anything out here, and I'll try to be brief. These are relatively new vouchers offered by HUD for youth between the age of 18 and 24 who are aging out of the foster care system or have aged out of the foster care system and are homeless or at risk of homelessness. It's a 3-year voucher, so it provides rental assistance similar to the normal Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program for 3 years only, and it requires a partnership of agencies in the community, including the Housing Authority, Department of Health and Human Services at the county, in our community, Elida Homes, Mountain Housing Opportunities, Appalachian Mountain Community Health Centers, and Goodwill Industries. We probably had a vote on that earlier in the year when I was out, but so far we have we're required to get a referral from the the Department of Health and Human Services for specific individuals before we can apply to HUD for the vouchers. Normally HUD issues a certain number of vouchers to each housing authority, and then we look for people that fit those qualifications. But this is much more, it's a streamlined process, but it requires us to have somebody ready to go. So far, we've submitted 5 requests for vouchers, and we've received approval for 5. There may be a couple others in the works, 3 others in the works, thank you. And we'll get those applications submitted as soon as possible. Any questions about that program? LVN.
How many vouchers are available?
There is $15 million available nationwide for vouchers. I don't think they have listed a cap on the number of vouchers. There may have, but I don't know what it is and it's non-competitive, so first come, first served. So it's fairly simple process. We're not sitting around waiting. I think it took us 2 to 3 months, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, to get all of our local stuff in order, and then we submitted the applications, and it probably took HUD about 30 days to respond to those. Which is lightning fast.
It is.
All right. Work group chairs. Are you ready, Marcus? Can we give us an update?
Sure. So coordinated entry work group, it's for accomplishments. What we worked on this past month was interim coordinated entry guidance policy. So looking at our current coordinated entry system, what things are we doing in our community, and then what things do we want the agencies to know so that we continue to operate our coordinated entry system and try and avoid some stagnation. Some particular challenges that we've had with the coordinated entry group have been identifying proper community access points. One thing that we have realized is that through our coordinated entry process, we have agencies that serve specific populations versus agencies that serve all homeless in general. So making sure that we identify proper community access points. We've tried to operate from a no wrong door policy, meaning that regardless of where you go, you are able to get the information that you need and have access to community services. This also presents an issue for us when we talk about a centralized versus a decentralized coordinated entry system. Geography is very important to coordinated entry, so making sure that across Asheville, the city of Asheville and Buncombe County, that we have entry points where people are able to access community supports. We've also discussed shelter points of entry. So again, increasing partnerships within the community to make sure that we have shelters available if they are. So I think that will go into some of the work that's already being done with the RFP for shelters, and then creating partnerships that allow us to streamline a process from coordinated entry into shelter access, as well as access to housing and beds that may be available. Current needs that we have, still looking to have additional community partners to act as coordinated entry or points of entry for coordinated entry, so that we can increase access across the geographical areas. Focus on what is considered a referral point versus what is considered an entry point. Meaning, so if we have agencies who are working with a specified population, they may come into contact with individuals who may not fit that mold. So we want those to look like referral points where they can give information on where an entry point may be so that an individual continues to have access, and they could make that referral to that access or entry point agency to make sure that resources are available. And looking at our upcoming focus, we are looking at designated coordinated entry points. Debbie has already done a great job, her and Emily, of outlining what our system may look like, at least at a draft point. So that will be an upcoming focus for us over the next few meetings to try and map out what our coordinated entry system should look like. We've reached out for guidance from the National Alliance to get some examples of other communities that are similar to Asheville. We do have some quirks because we are both urban and rural community. So we do have to consider that as we build out our coordinated entry system. Looking at designation of referral points, whether those will occur in agencies who are also acting as shelters, or if it will be just agencies that are specified to do day activities such as AHOPE. Reviewing potential concerns with our coordinated entry system. I think one of those will be our data sharing and making sure that as we go through coordinated entry, we know who's working with who, and we have good communication around those entry points. And then again, looking at whether or not we will be a centralized versus decentralized coordinated entry system and what the benefits of each may be.
Questions, Jamie?
So it sounds like the HMIS data sharing would really strengthen the overall work that you are looking at that needs to be done.
I believe so, yes.
My comment is that we have historically used coordinated entry primarily for permanent supportive housing or permanent housing placements of some kind. And the ideal is to use it further upstream in the process. I'll speak in a minute about what we're hearing from some other providers on the shelter work group. But shifting over now to the next group, Jen, governance.
The committees continue to meet as scheduled. A few of the members had a call with the San Diego's lead agency to learn a little bit more about what their process looked like, not just looking at their charter. We've continued to work on the language for the charter, and I really want to give a shout out to the committee members and to Matt Cable, who has helped. We've looked at the Houston charter, we have a draft, and now we're replacing parts of their charter with things that are really more specific to us. So when we talk about number of members on the committee, where we want those members to come from, like what their backgrounds should be, and whether or not they're at-large members or fixed member seats, et cetera. That's really kind of where we're focused and where we're at right now. Continued challenges are different opinions, different options. There's a variety, as I said last time. I think there's like over 400 different COC options. And so just kind of continuing to figure out what's going to be best for our community here. Needs is continued dedicated time. As we all know, every single person on that committee has many other things on their plates, and I'm really wanting to prioritize this. We know it's important, but still trying to continue to earmark time out. The next meeting, which was scheduled for June 19th, does fall on Juneteenth, which is a day that it's the observed holiday for both the city and the county. And so we have looked to move that, and we've added in a couple of additional meeting times to try to meet our goal and deadline of having a draft to this committee or to this board by the July meeting. Our upcoming focus continues to be on board structure. We feel like that's kind of where we have spent the majority of our time, where we need to continue to spend the majority of our time. That really identifies the individuals we'll have on this board moving forward. And as I stated just a moment ago, continue to have a goal to have a draft to you all by the July meeting. I do not have in front of me those meeting dates, but we'll have those to have announced by the end of the meeting so that people know in case they want to participate. As a reminder, we are meeting virtually. We have a virtual option and an in-person option for the governance meeting.
Any questions? David?
Thanks, David. So we recently, at the last meeting, I reported that we'd moved to every other week. We're meeting on Mondays from 3 to 5 in person. We do have a hybrid option available, but Haywood Street congregation. So we switched our meeting schedule and reapproved a new work plan with a hope to bring to this body a policy, an encampment policy by the August meeting. So that's the new goal. We have broken up into drafting groups to take on different sections of the policy. And those groups have started to organize and have met at least once or scheduled their first meetings. We have a listening session scheduled for next Tuesday with the lieutenant from the Asheville Police Department. We came up with some questions that we hope that they'll address, but basically it's an opportunity for us to just kind of learn how things are going for them, what their concerns are from law enforcement, and how they encounter as we start to draft how the policy will take place and how the first reactions from the community to make sure there's as much outreach as possible, surfing encampments. So we're looking forward to doing that. It won't be a discussion, but we're going ahead and getting the police department involved. They get an early stage to hear from them. And so we also will not be meeting on Juneteenth to observe the holiday, but we will be meeting next on the 26th, I think. So we do have a little bit of break, but there's going to be work going on in between our last meeting and the next one.
Questions? Jamie?
Did I hear you correctly? You're meeting at Haywood Street Church?
We're meeting on Mondays from 3 to 5, every other Monday from 3 to 5 in person. And there is a virtual option. You just need to let staff know or me know in advance, and we can make sure there's a way to join.
What an awesome place to hold an encampment meeting.
Yeah, I think the in-person meetings have been really good for building trust and rapport amongst the group, I would say. So.
Great. Thank you, David. The shelter work group is continuing to meet weekly on Mondays. We are meeting in person, but also have a remote option. We have received several letters of interest from local agencies to primarily focused on providing expanded shelter beds for families and for people with special needs. So the enhanced beds that will, to some extent, Jamie, serve as safe haven type beds going forward. We did not get a letter of interest so far for just the general population beds expansion, but we'll see what comes in with the request for partnership. We published the request for partnership, and those proposals are due back June 13th. We'll be evaluating those as soon as start evaluating those as soon as we have them. We are currently holding phone call interviews with various shelters around the country that were recommended by the National Alliance. We spoke this week so far with Providence, Rhode Island, and Flagstaff, Arizona. Both had interesting models. Providence is obviously a big city, and their program kind of covers the whole state of Rhode Island, so it's interesting in that way. Flagstaff is a city similarly sized to Asheville, in a county that is the second largest geographical county in the United States. And so they have interesting challenges there as well. Their shelters include a fairly decent-sized 100-bed congregate shelter and 2 hotels that they've purchased to provide non-congregate beds. We are continuing our focus, and the challenge is the winter is coming. So we want to make sure that we have expanded bed capacity in the short term, while we're also thinking toward longer term objectives and needs. We do continue to need input, and just chime in if you have it, or if you think of anything. I think we have a pretty good list now of what the barriers are that people are seeing in our community, including, in some cases, requirements of sobriety or abstinence, but also requirement to have an ID in advance of coming into a shelter, need to be able to accommodate a pet or service animal in the shelter, and other sort of timing deadlines when you have to be into the shelter, those sort of things. But if there are any other barriers that people are aware of that currently exist, we need to know what they are as we continue our planning. Talked already about the calls, and special thanks to our elected leaders, including Councilwoman Roney, and Mayor Mannheimer and Commissioner Jasmine Beach Ferrara for their participation in this important work. Any questions?
I just wanted to mention, one of the groups we talked to has couples housing. And that can be a barrier when somebody wants to stay together. Or, for example, if it's two members of a family who need to be housed together.
Thank you, Jamie. They called it couples shelter, and they had opened it during COVID, and they defined couples very openly. It wasn't necessarily two people in a relationship. It could be a father and a daughter, a mother and a son. So two people in a unit who want to shelter together and otherwise may not be able to based on restrictions in the community. And those were non-congregate, so individual rooms for each family unit. Okay.
David, before we move on, can I just, can we go back to governance so I can announce when those meeting dates are? I apologize for not knowing them a minute ago.
Go for it.
So our next meeting is going to be Monday, June 12th at 10 a.m. And again, there is a virtual option, but we do meet in person here in this building. There'll also be a meeting on Monday, June 26th at 11 a.m. and then also July 3rd at 10 a.m. Typically, we meet the first and third Monday, but again, due to the holiday and also in recognition of trying to get you all that draft, we've added in a couple more meetings.
The housing work group, the shelter work group meets every Monday, except we won't meet on the 19th. All right. So this next one is assigned to me, and I'm going to need some help with it. But we do have the big funding cycle from HUD is coming up sometime soon. It usually comes out in the summer and has a relatively quick deadline. I think we have a funding work group in place. With this bigger grant, we might want to expand it a little bit. Sarah, are you all on board in terms of handling this new funding cycle?
We can talk about that today. We have a meeting this afternoon.
Okay, great. So depending on that, we may need some other folks to be part of that conversation. Emily, what else do we need to cover with this?
That's great, thank you. We had talked probably 2 months ago just about how you all wanted to handle the planning process around the continuum of care funding, if you wanted to tie that in with the new funding allocations work group or establish a different planning body. So we just need to sort of chart our course about who's going to be involved in that planning process. So I think we're in good shape.
Okay. And then the next item, any other questions about that? Thoughts? Next item is refilling vacant HIAC seats at this point, or do we just have one? The stance we have had up until now is we have a governance committee looking at a new structure for the governing board that will eventually replace HIAC after it goes through the full process. And we have not been taking on new members at this point. I think we're all assuming that for continuity's sake, many, if not all, of the current board members will carry over to the new board, but there will be other opportunities when that happens. So I guess my question is whether we, anybody feels a strong need to fill that seat, or if we can continue the current, or if anybody knows, I guess, an essential person that we should have on this committee now, or essential agency that we should have represented now. It's just an opportunity to say something about that. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I really feel like we're missing a youth representative or schools representative. Really added a lot to our planning conversations, particularly if we're talking about additional vouchers.
So my recommendation would be that we open it and we see who applies. I think the governance committee is looking at it, at aligning the seats with what HUD recommends. So I don't think that it would be far skewed even whenever the governance structure of the charter does come out. So I think as long as we continue to keep in mind what what HUD recommends and then where we're currently missing seats, I feel like it could still be in alignment with both what the governance group is working on in relationship to the charter and the needs of the current board.
So you don't see a need to wait?
I don't personally. I am also only one voice on the governance committee, so I'd welcome anybody else on that committee to speak up if they feel differently. But I feel like we've really tried to work to align it to what the HUD recommendations are, and also keeping an eye on who do we currently have, and to Sarah's point, who are we feeling like is a need in our community. And so if we open up the position or open up the seat, it also still gives the flexibility to identify who is going to be the best to fill this seat. But right now, we don't even have any applicants to review.
Right, and I think from my perspective, if we're going to focus on schools or youth, we should do some recruiting around that, not just wait and see who happens to submit an application. Because we get a lot of interested citizens potentially who don't necessarily have an expertise in that area. So if that's the gap that we need to fill, let's focus on that.
There is technically a few other areas. I mean, I'm not disagreeing about the youth. I mean, I don't have a
services.
yeah.
Also.
We do have Emily created a chart for when the nominations committee used to meet, and it identified the recommendations from HUD and then where we don't currently have representatives, but youth is one. And as we all know, we did used to have representation from McKinney-Vento on this board. We don't have that right now. But then also to Sarah's point about Sarah Dickerson, who presented to us a couple of times ago about the focus of a new youth group starting in our community, that may be where this board feels like we need to have more voice.
I'll just clarify that folks can still be applying for HIAC through the clerk's office at the city and the county. The part that's been on pause is that this body had made a recommendation to the city and the county elected officials to not refill that vacancy pending this governance transition. So nothing needs to shift in order for people to be able to apply. It's just a recommendation to elected officials about whether or not to appoint.
This is a city position or a county position that's open?
City, I think.
So you could still do the recruitment for the HUD suggested seats that are missing voices at the table, and then just signal when you have the person that you need to round out this work that's being done right now, the work groups. But it's open now. You can
Right.
apply today, and the
Correct.
application stays on file for a year.
I think the other comment I would make is if we decide to do this, we probably need to talk about a nominating committee again, because I think when we last met, it's David and I.
The other thing I'd say is, depending on what the governance committee comes up with and what HIAC approves, we should at least notify the applicants that there's a governance change coming. You know, so some of the standard terms of how long you're in and what your requirements are, those could be subject to change. Not that I want to talk anybody out of volunteering to do work, but it would just not be fair to the candidates if they got on board in September and in October we put a new governance system in place.
Any other comments, suggestions, concerns? All right, now's our time for public comment. Anybody speak? Any other comments before we adjourn? All right, thanks, everybody. And I want to say thanks again to all the work group participants, because we decided to take on an aggressive schedule, and we needed to, and we continue to need to, but I know that it's challenging for folks. And I appreciate all the time that everybody's putting into it, including members of the committee and everybody else, and especially the staff. So, thank you.